Good evening. Welcome to Bullside Chats with Balanced Veterans. Tonight, we're going to have a special guest, Gerald Nep, and we're going to be talking about the different compounds that make up your cannabis flower and how they play the effects. Terpenes, flavonoids, THC, CBD, the whole nine. We'll see what we can get into because it's a lot to unpack, but we're gonna get into it. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell on YouTube so you know when we're going live and new videos drop. And let's bring the team in. We got to cover a few things before we bring Dr. Nep in that BVN had going over the weekend. We were busy. We were everywhere and nowhere all at the same time, maybe. But I know Greg was out at Hash Bash. Welcome, Greg. How was Hash Bash? Why don't you give us a review? I sadly missed it, but was busy giving a grow class here.
Yeah, so Hash Bash this year was, I guess, like every other year, Hash Bash has been in the past weather-wise. I'm from Michigan and I'm a Michigan resident. So if there's any listeners out there listening, they know what I'm talking about. Hash Bash is like that holiday where you always plan out to go camping. The weather says sunshine and rainbows until the day of the event. We got out there. It was really cold, really windy, but we survived through the weather and we had a great time. It was a great event. We made a lot of great contact with a lot of local veterans. We had a lot of good communication. We got our mission out there, and the local Ann Arbor scene really seems to be supporting us out there. We made a lot of really great contacts with potential people to work with in the future, similar to Sensi Seeds and stuff like that. So our community can look forward to a lot of support coming from Michigan. And overall, Terry and Eric came down and got to see Michigan. So we got to kind of go around a little bit and see Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan. And of course, we got to smoke some really, really phenomenal hash. With it being Hash Bash, we got to imbibe in a lot of really good hash, actually. So it was a good time. And we found some balance. After Hash Bash, we came home, found some good food, rested up, got up the next day, went and made some good contacts at some dispensaries, and then we got out and played some disc golf and found some balance at the end of the weekend and kind of tied the knot in a fantastic weekend. It was my first time meeting Eric, and he kind of came out and played some disc golf. And he always told me, I'm not very good at disc golf, but he came out and he actually beat me by a stroke. So it was really fun, a little competitive disc golf at the end of the weekend to wrap it up. And overall, it was a really good weekend. Found a lot of balance. There was, like I said, it was cold to begin with, but we persevered through the weather and just made it a good weekend, made the best of it, and made a lot of really good friends and really put our community out there. And I think we're going to be gaining a lot of really good, solid community members and support from the weekend. What about you guys? I hear you said you had a grow class this weekend, is why you couldn't make it. And I've seen a little bit on Facebook. I haven't really been on Facebook too much, but I'm actually upset I missed the grow class because I'm in full gear right now, getting ready for growing season, outdoor growing season, and I'm getting ready to start popping seeds. So tell me a little bit about how that went.
Well, I'll say this, as the new director of Operation 1620, Bryce knocked it out of the park. He gave a really comprehensive class, and I kind of just rode his coattails. It was really great time. We had several people come out from the community. We had a lot of support for this grow class, thanks to Sensi Seeds, thanks to Homegrown for Heroes. We got, and big shout out to Next Level Indoor Garden Supply in Rockford, Illinois for hosting us. They also provided some freebies. Everybody walked away from there with, at least $50, $60 in swag. We had lots of goodies donated. And most importantly, they got some education on how to grow the plant at home. And they got a community to fall back on when they feel overwhelmed by this process. Because really, it's not that hard if you have people there right alongside you who are there to help you when you stumble, so to speak. That's kind of like ruck marching, which we're doing a lot of this month. You pick up your brother's pack and carry it for them, or your sister's pack, and throw your arm around their shoulder and help them through the finish line. And that's what these grow classes are all about. You're not going to learn how to grow a plant in one sitting, but you're going to gain the confidence, you're going to gain the community to be able to do that. So I'm really grateful for everybody that came out. And it seems like this is something we're going to start doing a little bit more often in a few more places. Looking at you, New Jersey, looking at you, Michigan and Ohio. These are some places where we've had some good even Alabama, so we can get out and start educating our community a little bit more. It was fantastic. How do you feel about it, Bryce? It was your first time giving a grow class, I believe.
It was my first time giving a grow class, but I've helped mentored lots of people along the way, and so it's not really that difficult talking and teaching about something that you love to do anyways. So it like you said, it was a real fun grow class, and then it's always easier to grow with a community, somebody else that you're growing alongside with that's able to help you out or maybe give you an idea if something's going wrong or maybe they have something going wrong. And then if y'all two can't figure it out, you got a big community to fall back on and just kind of help everybody grow and, basically get the quality medicine that they need. And then the swag pack was really unbelievable. Thank you, Sensi Seeds, for that. Just donating the seeds themselves will help everybody start growing. And like you were hearing a lot of people say, they were getting excited for the outdoor season, and it helped.
Yeah, outdoors upon us. So another great way we help with our veterans in the community is a lot of states require us to have a medical card, including Illinois, so we can provide that and break down that barrier for them too. So if you do need your medical card and you are a veteran, reach out to us at bbn.vet. We certify in 32 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, and we have the doctors on staff and the certification crew and reimbursements for state fees. That's a big thing we do. And if a grow class sounds interesting to you and you're in the Chicago area, come out to the 420 Vibe event at American Legion Post 96 in Cicero on 420. I'm not going to be giving the whole in-depth grow class like me and Bryce did, but we're going to give just a kind of brief breakdown on growing and how horticulture is therapy and how balanced veterans can support you on that journey. And if there's enough demand for it, maybe we can get the Legion to have us come down and give a grow class down there for you all down in that area. I would really actually love to do that. So come on down and support us at the 420 Vibe event. Besides the grow shop, grow class, there's going to be like some singing bowls and meditation. I think they might have a yoga and some art workshops, all cannabis friendly. There'll be food and community, come down and check that out. And then don't forget Memorial Day doubles Anna Page Park. You can sign up for that at a disc golf scene. Please come out and support the disc golf event. If you don't disc golf, come out. We're going to have food trucks and raffles and all kinds of other stuff. You'll see all of our smiling faces. I mean, what more can you want?
Well, we'll have a family community center, a fun zone for the kids, a little putting area, face painters. Hopefully we can get somebody out there making balloon animals. If you know anybody, leave a comment.
Yeah, and if you'd like to come out, if you're a veteran nonprofit or a veteran small-owned business, you'd like to come out and set up that day, you're welcome to come out and set up and contact one of us, and we'll get you there. Yeah, and with that, I think we need to move right to it because we've been 10 minutes into it, and we need every minute we can with Dr. Gerald Nep. Welcome this evening, Gerald. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Excited to have you back. If you guys don't know, check out the YouTube channel. There's a whole series on the tinctures that Dr. Nep has formulated. And we do have the code out there for our veterans. So reach out to me if you want that discount code. He's a plethora of knowledge. And I don't think we got enough in the over hour of recording him last time to even touch base on all this good stuff that we got to get into. So why don't we start by the big question I get is, can you help us understand Delta 8 and Delta 9?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I can see why it would come up so often. We're seeing a lot of Delta 8 products in the market. Before we get into anything, though, I think it's very important to know what you're getting and know your source of medication, because we saw it with the CBD market years ago, where things were being marketed as having so much CBD. And then they did some studies on those products from gas stations and wherever, and found out some products didn't contain any CBD and others contained very little. So whatever the group's going to try, just be careful where you're getting your products from. But if we look at the actual science, Delta 8 THC is very close to Delta 9 THC. The only difference chemically is a double bond. So we would expect that to be, have very similar effects within the body because it's so closely related. Delta 8 has been, even though, and I think in the American market, we've only, I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, really recognized Delta 8 as being anything. Back in the 1990s, they were studying it in Israel, and they were using it in children that were experiencing nausea from chemotherapy. And if you look at those studies, it actually helped the nausea with very little side effects. And that was done by Raphael Mechoulam, who was a very famous cannabis researcher from Israel. He's probably the grandfather of cannabis research. So we've known even from, that was 35 years ago, that Delta 8 is relatively safe. It can really help with nausea, probably even more so than Delta 9 THC. So now what you're probably getting questions about is, comparing them directly to each other. And Delta 8, depending on the study you look at, it's anywhere from 30 to 50% less psychoactive than Delta 9. And I'm a little hesitant to say that or put a number on it because I've worked with thousands of patients over the years, and I've run into some patients that they actually get a little bit more psychoactivity from Delta 8 than Delta 9. They're very rare. I would say the general trend is about 30% as much psychoactivity with a Delta 8 compared to Delta 9. But it can really be up to the individual.
Now, see, I've always understood Delta 8 to be chemically altered CBD. So you take a CBD or a hemp flower and then you add sulfuric acid to it, and it breaks down the CBD and it ends up breaking it into a THC, which in turn is the Delta 8.
That is one way to make it. I mean, if you look at the chemical structure of all the known cannabinoids that we work with regularly, I mean, most of them have the same molecular weight. They're so close in chemical structure. So it's not hard to manipulate one cannabinoid into another. It's really basic organic chemistry. I think Delta 8 in small amounts is a natural cannabinoid. And oftentimes, too, if you're into producing Delta 8 or products that contain Delta 8, you'll get Delta 8 and up to 10% of it will actually be Delta 9, because sometimes that double bond will flip back and forth depending on the chemical process.
Okay, yeah.
It's interesting. I think a lot of this makes sure, like Dr. Nep said, is source your product correctly. Clearly, if you're able to play some organic chemistry and spin some of these things around, you want to make sure the people that are doing it aren't backyard wizards. The stuff needs to be clean. It needs to be safe because it's medicine. And also, as stated, all this medicine plays a little bit different in everybody's body. Everybody's endocannabinoid system affects them differently. So go slow when you're trying any of these things and have patience and understand it might be a little bit different for you. Like you said, you might have a weird psychoactive effect. Understand, though, that it is just the plant medicine and it will be over shortly if you do happen to consume too much of it. So, yeah, let's keep going from there.
TJ, can I say one last thing about Delta 8? As a clinical cannabis pharmacist, we had Delta 8 in the market that I primarily work in for a brief amount of time. And it was a really good cannabinoid for people who were brand new to cannabis, that were maybe sensitive to Delta 9 THC, and it was maybe too much. We would start them on the Delta 8, just kind of ease them into their cannabis experience. And especially with the elderly or people who are kind of afraid of full-blown Delta 9 THC, that was a good niche for it because it still helped with anxiety and with some of the chronic pain.
Excellent. So in the Delta 8 and Delta 9s, we're talking THCs. Another acronym that I'm going to hear a lot now is the THCA flower. And you're seeing it available in, again, gas stations, which I don't recommend buying anything at a gas station to anybody. But you're seeing it in different shops, CBD shops, and mixed right alongside that. And my understanding of THC is that it's in all cannabis that has THC in. Can you just explain that a little bit? You explain it much better than I do. It's so fun to have you.
No, you're doing a great job at it. So THCA it's still the tetrahydrocannabinol, but it's the acid form of it. So that's where you get the A, THCA. Typically if you buy flower at a dispensary, they'll have all those cannabinoids labeled. And if you're just buying straight flower, you're going to see most of the THC is in the THCA form. So you might see 25% THCA and maybe 2 or 3% THC. So then you can do the math, but essentially you add it. There's a little conversion factor to find out what the total THC is, because you lose some of the molecular weight when you convert THCA to THC. So, but essentially all cannabis, all marijuana flower is usually in the THCA form. The reason you're seeing this in some of the hemp dispensaries or adult use dispensaries is because it was a little bit of a loophole in that was it the 2018 Farm Bill that didn't account for THCA. So in my mind, it's a little bit of a gray area, but I think a lot of people are running with that. So Delta 9 THCA, once heated, so if you heat it up, whether you're cooking with it, so you're hitting that 240 degrees for say like 30 minutes, or if you vape it or smoke it, that heat will kick off that carboxyl group, and that converts THCA to THC. So I'm going to take flower and say smoke it or vape it. It's mostly THCA, and as soon as I put that heat to it, it will convert over the THC. So in my mind, there's really not a lot of difference between THCA flower and what you're going to buy at like say in a medical marijuana dispensary.
Correct. It's just nice to have it said. You said it very well. And the decarboxylation process is something what we have to do when we have our cannabis flower. If you were to ingest that raw, it would have no psychoactive effects, really. You'd just be eating the plant, and you would gain medicinal effects, but not the psychoactive effects, because that's what turning it to the THC that we smoke is. And also our edibles and all that stuff get decarboxylated. So it is kind of unique.
That's a really great point too, because THCA without being converted is considered non-psychoactive, but they've done a couple of small studies showing it's a great anti-inflammatory, and it may be very effective as an anti-seizure medication too for epileptic patients. So I feel like that's been, because it can be converted to Delta 9 THC, and that's a desired molecule, that the THCA has been understudied, and there still might be some more medicinal benefits there that we haven't discovered yet.
It is absolutely great for anti-inflammatory. I can tell you that one of my friends' grandma used to get raw cannabis plant, and she would ask, for the flower, I'd put it in alcohol, and then she rubs it on her joints. And that's the way they would do it down in Mexico. And Green Dragon is what I was told it was done when you take the raw flower and put it into an alcohol and don't bring any heat to it. And then you use it as a topical rub. But it's very, very interesting the way that people are able to get this plant medicine out to everybody. So like Dr. Nep said, it is the same product. They may do a few things to get the THCA levels where they need to for lab testing. I'm seeing people are cutting early, like week 6 or 7 instead of going to week 8 or 9. So the THCA doesn't convert on its own on the plant and stays low. And they're also rapidly drying it again to make sure that the process of it, the conversion doesn't happen on its own. Let's get into some more questions.
I got something here real quick, CJ. I kind of want to ask him about. You said the THCA, it piqued my interest when you said anti-inflammatory. So for myself, I have Crohn's disease, which is kind of like an auto-inflammatory disease. Most of my symptoms deal with inflammation in my intestinal tract and GI. So with something for people that are dealing with a lot of heavy inflammatory issues, would they benefit more from a non-decarboxylated cannabis oil, or say like a full extract cannabis oil that's made from non-decarboxylated flower, along with some of these other cannabinoids? Would it be better for that instead of, say, using a full extract that's been decarboxylated?
Possibly. So I don't want to go too far out on a limb, because all these questions, I can tell you the anecdotal evidence I've seen and then refer to some of the scientific studies that they put out. But a lot of these questions really need to see like a double-blind, placebo-controlled study to get to the bottom of it. I believe there's a traditional drink they make in India called Bang. I think it's BHANG, that's made with cannabis flower. And I think for the most part, it's considered it's not decarboxylated. So it has the acid form. And I think that has some health benefits to it. So yes, I think THCA on its own could really help with inflammation. And I don't see any negative effects in the literature that wouldn't be worth trying. Even just, I used to mix it with like green tea and then steep it like tea. And I'd add a little bit of oil in there just to get some of it to, kind of go into solution a little bit better, kind of get that cannabinoids off the flower. As far as like Crohn's, and this kind of goes in maybe to the next question we're going to get at, is there's a cannabinoid called CBG. That cannabinoid is being seen, even more research being done on it recently. But there's several studies showing that it's really good for Crohn's and IBD symptoms. It seems to decrease inflammation within the gut. It seems to prevent cancerous cells from forming. I think the cancerous cells was mostly seen in animal studies, if I'm remembering correctly. And there was one study showing that the CBG may change the gut microbiome so it's healthier. So we've seen in my practice, at least a dozen patients that were on, if they weren't already scheduled for surgery, they were on the path to have some sort of surgery where they're removing part of their colon because of Crohn's or IBD or IBS. And those patients would come on like a whole plant extract that was spiked with CBG, and it's changed their lives where they didn't have to have surgery. Like, to see people in tears to see this product, to see cannabis change their lives like that it changes your world, and you realize how beneficial this could be. But I think if you follow the studies, you follow the anecdotal information, anything gut health, I think CBG is probably the way to look at, or the way to kind of experiment with, especially a little bit higher doses. Like, too often we're seeing CBG where it's maybe 5 or 10 milligrams. With my patients, oftentimes it's more like 50 to 100 milligrams per dose. It really does the trick. It seems to be more beneficial.
That's good information to know. And it's ironic you brought up the Bang, because that's why I asked the question. I've been looking into drinks for gut health and anti-inflammatory. I've been drinking kombucha, and I came across that drink that was Bang, made with fresh cannabis. And that's why I asked, because I think that there's got to be something to it. So maybe in the future, when we can do a little bit more open research on cannabis and somebody really targets that specific, we'll know a little bit more.
Maybe you have a product line there. Maybe we could bring that to the United States, and it could be the next kombucha in all the health food stores.
I've been looking for that $1 million idea. I'm going to write that down. Muted, CJ.
You're muted, CJ.
Oh man, that was a killer idea I had. Maybe I shouldn't speak it aloud. I'll talk to you in private on it. But no, that led perfectly into our next thing, because my next question was going to be about the CB compounds. We hit our THC compounds. We hit CBG there, but there's some other ones we hear a lot about, and it's the CBDs and CBNs. And you want to pick one of them, your favorite, and run with it there, Gerald, because a lot of your product line revolves around the CBD side of things, and using these tinctures to heal, like you were saying, the CBG with the Crohn's disease. And we're just going to keep digging into this and seeing how this stuff helps. And so, yeah, we want to take the ball and run with it here.
Yeah, I mean, looking at some of the minor cannabinoids, like I would probably classify them. Major cannabinoids are typically, you would say, THC and CBD. And CBD got very famous with Charlotte Figi, and she got the editorial. She got the notoriety on CNN because they're basically using CBD to help her seizure disorder. And that's been probably 15 years ago. We're still seeing more and more research coming out just on CBD alone. There's an article here that I'm putting in one of our newsletters about CBD and autism. That was just a brand new recent article. They've studied it for traumatic brain injury, inflammation. There's so many things that CBD has been linked to, but oftentimes people have a hard time finding like a good source of it that's reliable, and then getting it at a high enough dose where it's effective without breaking the bank. One example is Epidiolex is a prescription medication it's essentially just a CBD tincture that goes in the mouth, and it seems to work really well for people who have seizures that are They weren't, the other medications didn't help, intractable seizures. And the CBD, but a lot of those CBD doses, we're talking hundreds of milligrams per day for them to see that clinical effect. And then so if you go into a dispensary and they give you a CBD product that has 5 milligrams, you might get some effect, but it's not the same as, say, getting 50 to 100 or 200 milligrams a day, especially when we're talking about brain health or anti-inflammatory properties. And the great thing about those you call them the CB cannabinoids, is they're typically considered I wouldn't say they're non-psychoactive. I'd say they don't cause any sort of intoxication. So like CBD is really good for, say, PTSD or anxiety, and kind of having that peace. And so is CBG to a lesser extent. I think CBG is really good for that, but it hasn't been studied as much as CBD. But so they're psychoactive in that they kind of help calm down and kind of relax and make the brain a little bit more stable in a lot of these conditions. But it doesn't have that intoxication effect that maybe a high dose THC would. So non-psychoactive doesn't really fit the bill on that one. But CBG is great. We're seeing more of that. You guys were talking about growing earlier. I actually grow a high dose CBG strain called the White. We love that plant. We love that strain. And we can probably get 18% CBG out of that flower, which is excellent. And then CBN is another one. We're learning more about CBN all the time. We use it for sleep. And I think that was mentioned earlier a little bit too, is that it seems like when it's combined with THC, it can really help people fall and stay asleep. And so that's what we typically recommend it for. But there was a study that came out not too long ago, maybe within the last 6 months, showing that CBN actually can help the mitochondria within brain cells. So the mitochondria are like the workhorses of the cell. They produce the energy, like the power plants of the cell. So think of your brain as malfunctioning, whether it's traumatic brain injury or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. And then you can take a supplement that would actually help the mitochondria work more effectively and have better output. So by using that CBN, they're starting to see some of these symptoms of these brain disorders go away. So we're actually treating the health of the brain, and then we're seeing clinical effects from that. And so that was just one study. So it'd be very interesting to see where that goes. But it seems like it's a pattern with all of cannabis where it helps some of these conditions and symptoms, but it's actually helping the whole body. It's actually kind of working at the root of the problem, or working on that endocannabinoid level where it's affecting not just one spot in the body, but like multiple systems within the body.
It is truly a magical plant that has the ability to do a lot of things, and to be able to explain it in this way and study it is so important. Pay attention when you all go out there and vote, and make sure you're voting for the right stuff, because we need to be able to get this, like, more educated people like Dr. Gerald Nep need to have access to all this product to go through it and see what all these different compounds can do. Because I mean, this CBG with your gut health can be game changing. And talk about game changing. Something we talked about in our first discussion was THCV. Yeah. And some of again, it's anecdotal and it's early, but we mentioned that it was, I don't want to, like a diet, helping with diabetes. I don't know if it was type 1 or what it was, but showing some effects to help people with like their blood sugars and stuff like that. Was that right? Am I recalling correct?
Yeah, you are. THCV is quite remarkable. So people hear THC and they think, oh, that's the psychoactive and intoxicating effect. And to my knowledge, like taken orally or sublingually, THCV does not seem to have like a psychoactive or intoxication effect. There's some speculation that if you vape, like a Durban poison, which is from South Africa originally, that has a little bit of THCV, that initial head high might be from vaping the THCV. But I would say that's a little bit more rumor than fact at this point. We just don't know. But if you look at THCV as in that oral or that sublingual form, it does seem to help with metabolic disorder or pre-diabetes. So it helps your body process that glucose load. It helps insulin sensitivity, and it reverses a lot of the root causes of type 2 diabetes. So I've used that with my pre-diabetic and my type 2 diabetic patients now for more than a year, and it's really helped. I have a close friend who's a type 1 diabetic, and so that means they're insulin dependent, and it's more of a genetic thing from when he was a young child. He started using the THCV combined with CBD, and he noticed that he was feeling better, he had less inflammation, but he actually has one of the constant pumps of insulin. And he noticed after about a week, he was using about half as much insulin than before he started the THCV. So this is like cutting edge, and I don't have any evidence showing that it helps with type 1 diabetes, but all the science leading up to that, it's not I wouldn't be surprised if there was a study showing that, hey, we can use this for diabetics. Now, it's funny that you brought that up. There was a study that just came out, in February. And it again confirmed that THCV can cause weight loss. So we know that it suppresses suppresses your appetite a little bit. So again, if you need to put on weight, THCV is not the way to go. But it helps with weight loss. And they did a study, and I have it right here in front of me, where they combined THCV and CBD. And the one group where they used 8 milligrams of THCV and 10 milligrams of CBD, they lost 6 pounds in 90 days on average. Some of them lost a lot more. And then they doubled that dose in the second group, and they lost 9 pounds in 90 days. No diet changes, no exercise changes. And what they didn't expect, but what they found is it actually they decreased their abdominal girth, so they lost fat off their stomach. It also lowered their systolic blood pressure, and it reduced their total cholesterol and their LDL cholesterol. So as a pharmacist, we're thinking, okay, what is the major cause of death in the United States? It's cardiovascular disease, and diabetes is closely tied to that. So you're telling me we have a combination here that's been studied for THCV and CBD that can help weight loss, blood pressure, cholesterol, and also reduce inflammation within the body. I'm thinking why isn't that first line therapy compared to all the other prescription medications that are on the market? So we definitely need to see more information there, but it's amazing what these studies are showing.
Why isn't it first line therapy? Because it actually truly allows people to heal at a lower cost than pharmaceuticals, just like everything we talk about in this podcast, from the psilocybin mushrooms to the cannabis plant. These are ways to truly have not just veterans, but our entire community can truly heal. The benefits of the cannabis plant are never ending. I mean, from weight loss to helping diabetes, helping people sleep, potential helps in gut health. And we're still only touching on the tip of the iceberg, because I want to talk a little bit about entourage effect. And this is something I know you're a little bit aware of. And just so you know, Dr. Nep is not here to shamelessly plug himself, but I will. Right below us on here, defiantremedies.com. He has all these different tinctures, and they're formulated in different ways using all of what we just talked about above, and some other things, some other secondary metabolites that the plant has. We call them terpenes. We're also now seeing that flavonoids and esters are starting to play a critical part in how this plant affects us. So can you go into a little bit about terpenes? And again, we can base this off of some of your tinctures if you'd like to kind of follow that route, where we can, talk a little bit of how Miserin helps with sleep. I think I said it right, or however you want to kick it off, because it's really unique and interesting. And again, I please everybody go back and listen to the older episodes with me and Gerald, and he goes down and talks about each different tincture he has available and how it can help you. For now, we'll just kind of focus on the terpenes, but we can use those as points of references, how they affect you, those specific terpenes.
Yeah, we probably pronounce it a little differently. I pronounce the long E, the terpenes, but there's so many different pronunciations. Before we move on to that, I did do that trim tincture I have right here. Like, we formulated this for the veterans to help with weight loss, and not knowing that this study was coming out, it actually contains THCV and CBD, and then all the terpenes related to appetite suppression. And what we've been seeing, so the study they did was once a day, they use a adhesive strip in the mouth that slowly dissolves. We just use the tincture, but we're seeing that using that twice a day is more effective than what that study was showing. So I hate to say it, but I feel like what we've been doing working with BVN here is that we're actually kind of ahead of the curve and even like slightly ahead of the cutting edge science. But going on to the terpenes, I mean, they've identified about 120 of these chemicals within cannabis. I would say in the scientific community and the medical community, we focus on probably the main 8 to 12, but every day we're seeing that expand even more so. The terpenes are like a volatile chemical. So the cannabinoids are, for the most part, specific to cannabis. You know, that the cannabis plant makes those. I mean, you have some mosses and they can be found other places, but it's pretty rare. The terpenes can be found all throughout nature. So different flowers and fruits and plants will make these terpenes. The cannabis plant also does it. And you alluded to the entourage effect. And that's what when you use all these cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids together, that's the overall effect that we get. And we have just now started seeing some studies where they're looking at combinations of terpenes and cannabinoids into what effects they may generate. So how do we put this? So we have studies where they study just the cannabinoids within animal models, with human models. And we have a lot of studies that look at terpenes within animals and humans, but that they're only the terpenes and not actually using them together. And what we found out, just being in the cannabis community, that there seems to be definitely synergistic effects when using those compounds together. Dr. Ethan Russo is well known, probably the greatest American researcher in cannabis. He is known for really pushing forward the terpene theory. And his latest publication was looking at limonene and high THC. And he showed scientifically that limonene helps reduce the anxiety or paranoia possibly produced by THC. And we've kind of known that just anecdotally, but it's really nice to see someone actually looking at these relationships between the terpenes and the cannabinoids in a very practical sense. But we were joking before this started that there's so much information here that this could be a college level class and we could teach this for 15 weeks. So, I can hit some of the highlights here, but there's a lot of information with terpenes, but we're speculating a little bit at how it works in the plant and what concentrations we're looking for to maximize the benefits. Typically in flower, you're looking, sometimes it's less than 1% on some of these terpenes. You get into a vape product and you'll start to see like 2 to 3%. And sometimes they'll concentrate the terpenes and you'll start to see like 6 to 9%, maybe 10% in some of these vape products. At some point, they might become caustic to the lungs. Like I don't know if I would vape something that's 50% limonene just because it hasn't been studied. But we don't know exactly what the optimal amount of terpenes are yet, just as it hasn't been studied thoroughly. Now, in the tinctures we formulated, we stuck around like a total of 10% terpenes for most of the products. So it's going to have a ton of limonene in some of these. The recovered tincture that we put together has 10% beta caryophyllene because we know that CBD helps with reduced cravings and helps with recovery from addiction. But beta caryophyllene has also been studied for that. So we combine the two in that recovered product. And then beta caryophyllene is actually a larger molecule that works in the CB2 receptor, similar to CBD. So it's a terpene, but oftentimes that one in particular will act like a cannabinoid. So, I mean, are there any terpenes that you are interested in talking about tonight?
I was just hoping to hit a couple of the big ones. You hit beta caryophyllene. Like we had our buddy Eric on who does beekeeping. He was talking about how the bees bring in like linalool and how that can have a calming effect, right? So is another big one. And am I saying it right? The one that
I've heard it pronounced several ways. I call it limonene, but limonene. I'm not the expert on that. So
so they all have a different effect though. So like the one tincture I had of yours, it smelled very citrusy and it did give a nice it was a calming but nice uplifting feeling, right? And the sleep one, I think it was more Miserin dominant. Is that right, with the sleep tincture? It was kind of earthy toning. So just know, as you're out there and experiencing this plant medicine, the different smells are going to play into the effects, and it's going to be different from person to person. In most parts, again, it is broad spectrum, but you might be that oddball out there, that the one that calms everybody else down speeds you up. So keep playing with the plant medicine and you'll figure it out. So let's see, where else can we go from here? Are there any emerging cannabinoids or terpenes that you are excited to study yourself, or anything that you're going to be playing with in the near future?
Yeah, we grow our own plants and we do a very basic extraction, but then I also bring in isolate forms of cannabinoids so we can hit those extremely high doses and make it effective. And some of the cannabinoids have been very expensive. So we were just able to bring in THCV in the last year, and the latest one is CBC, which hasn't got a lot of love, but it seems to work really well for depression. So we've combined that with CBG and then some of the terpenes that are more uplifting and happy. And so we actually have a new tincture called Happy. But that CBC has been one of the best things that I've ever seen for depression patients. If we have time for a story, when I working in a dispensary in Pennsylvania years ago, there seemed to be an error made at one of the labs, one of the processing centers, and they put CBC products on the market. So something must have happened, and that, you know, how the chemical structures are so close that something converted over. But we were seeing tinctures that were about 30 to 50% CBC. And my depression patients would come back and be like, I have never felt this good in years. And then there was a couple of vapes they had on the market, and the depression patients loved that too. So, I mean, that's just an anecdotal story. Maybe there was like a dozen or so patients that we were actively following. But when those CBC products were finally they fixed their process and were no longer on the market, we had a lot of sad patients not be able to get that. So I'm happy to bring that CBC product, because if you look at, and this is when you're talking about anything medical, it's always risk versus reward, the risk versus benefit. So when you look at what we have out there prescription wise to treat depression, we don't have great prescription medications. The SSRIs are commonly known for that, but you can make an argument that they're not very effective, that just daily exercise is probably more effective than taking an SSRI. But they also come with a lot of side effects, the way you feel, your mood, suicidal ideation. There's a lot of issues with those products. And so if we could create or bring more attention to these cannabis products, it's a much safer alternative because it doesn't come with those side effects. And I think if we study them head to head, would probably be more effective. And so that's probably a bigger argument of so many of these cannabis products should be first line therapy in our medical community and not saved for last resort. Something that has virtually no side effects and has potentially all these benefits. Let's try that in patients first before we're going into a prescription medication that comes with a lot of known side effects. Just my opinion on that.
Yeah, your opinion is shared in our community, and that's why we have you here today, because you're right. And we don't have all the knowledge out here on the front lines as consumers, right? We don't know what it is sometimes. We don't know that it's CBC in these plants that have that magic touch for us. But that's what it is, and that's why the research needs to come out. This is also why I want to advocate 100% for home grow. So when you find that plant that has what it is you need, you're able to keep it around forever. You'll always have that plant. And the standards for testing won't change or whatever, and they won't take it off your store shelf. You'll have the plant medicine you need forever. So as we know, Dr. Nep grows his own. So is there any cultivation techniques or environmental factors that can affect the production of any of these things? Anything, like you said, we got a lot of people that grow in our podcast. Do you have any tricks for bringing out terpenes? I mean, for me, THC numbers be damned. That's what the dispensary wants to sell me. I know that the magic in the plant really comes from all these other things that are out there. So CBC, is that something that just comes naturally in plants, or is it something we can help push forward with, like, I don't know if it light spectrums or things, like, because they're trying all kinds of different things with far reds or anything like that? Any kind of tips or tricks you can talk to, or techniques that might influence the concentration of these metabolites in our cannabis plants when we grow them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I wish I had more answers to that because I'm interested in that myself. I don't have anything that I think would be super beneficial to the group, but I am excited about all the great breeders that we have in the United States in particular, because I mentioned the white that I grow, and I love that you grow these strains enough and you really begin to love them. Like I know the strains, I know the differences I need in the nutrients and then the care to get each of them to kind of reach their full potential. And there's nothing more peaceful than being out in a cannabis field and just kind of being there with the plants. It's very relaxing, possibly spiritual, but it's you can just feel it's a great experience. So I think I really like the breeding because we're seeing more strains come out that are specific to these cannabinoids. So we have a lot of great CBG strains. I can't grow, just because of the rules of my state, I can't grow the THCV that's a 1-to-1, but I would say in the last year and a half, there's been some strains come out where it ends up being about 8% THC and maybe 8 or 9% THCV. Those are really exciting because that makes that cannabinoid much more accessible. I did grow a very interesting CBDV variety because it's being studied for Huntington's disease, and I was trying to get that into a research study. But it started off as a very weak plant, and then as it grew, it almost looked like a chandelier. Like it was like one cola in the middle, and then like almost catty nine tails growing up around it. I haven't seen any plant like that before. So very interesting, but I don't know if I can add much, but very curious to see where the breeders take this. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see like a high CBC strain in the next year or two, just because the breeders are so good at kind of cultivating what they want to see.
I think you did nail it. Go ahead, Greg.
I was once told, and I'm not sure where I heard this in a study somewhere, and it might be like the WebMD type of knowledge of cannabis, but I would like you to maybe put some insight to this that I heard, is that THC, when especially aged over time, converts into CBG. Is that true? Do you know anything along that lines? Is there some science to that?
I think you have it a little backwards. So when the cannabinoids are produced in the plant, the first cannabinoid it produces is CBG. And then CBG, through different enzymes, is converted to the other major and minor cannabinoids. So CBG, sometimes they call as the mother cannabinoid because it's the first one. So before we had specific strains for CBG, you could harvest your plants early before it all converted, and you get more CBG that way. Now, I think what you might be getting mixed up here is that over time, THC, when it oxidizes, will convert to CBN. Now,
okay, that's I think what I heard.
Yeah. So that's a hard process. At least in my experience, that's a hard process to manipulate. But so if you have cannabis flower sitting around and say you lose track of it and you find it several years later, there's a good chance that some of that THC is oxidized into CBN. You might get more of a tired or sleepy experience, all using that cannabis flower that has oxidized.
Good to know. So then if some of us wanted to, use some of this old cannabis we find laying around in our closet, it could actually make good sleep medicine then.
It could. I've been surprised how long cannabis can last and still be useful. If you dry and cure it right, it's amazing how long it can survive.
100%. And you nailed it. I asked you a kind of a trick question on how to bring more terpenes out. I think the key is to be out there with your plants and make sure when you know your plants, you know what nutrients they need. And to bring a plant to its full potential is how you're going to see it express itself best. But with that said, I'm seeing a lot of grow science that's showing stressing our plants in certain ways can help manipulate be it terpene production or trichrome production, because realize the plant is producing these for different reasons. In nature, some of these terpenes are actually like pest defenses or whatever it may be. So it's always growing and playing with our plants to see what they're going to bring. We're almost reaching our hour mark. I have a couple other questions, but I think they're just going to go a little bit too in depth. And
CJ, can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
So I've heard we're close to Penn State University, and there's a rumor that they've been studying a caterpillar, that when the caterpillar is found in the area of the cannabis plants that's growing, that the cannabis actually produces higher THC. Have you ever heard that before?
I have not.
And
That's makes pretty interesting, though.
The idea is that the cannabinoids, the theory is that cannabinoids are being produced to protect the plant from sunlight, ultraviolet light, but also maybe it's a natural pesticide as well. And so I was just trying to look it up here, but that was one of the rumors I heard last season, is that there's a particular type of caterpillar that the plant just knows is in the area and it produces higher THC levels.
Well, I'm from the level of bro science because I don't have a degree. So I'm guessing that the caterpillars get too stoned and then they don't want to eat anymore. No, it's really cool to see all the science that's coming out. And you mentioned the guy's name, I forgot it, but that doctor from Israel who kicked off all this research and really started identifying CBD and all this stuff all those years ago. We stand on the shoulders of giants today. Yeah. It's a term I've said forever when it comes to this plant medicine. All the people who stuck their neck out there and done all the hard work for all the years when it wasn't as openly acceptable. And today it is openly acceptable to a point, but even like you said, you can't grow all plants in your field. So support Balanced Veterans Network, everybody out there listening. We're going to be back in DC April 28th for the Policy Summit with a bunch of other nonprofits, Cannabis Policy Summit. Our goal is to make sure this medicine can be available to everybody in every state. People like Dr. Nep and universities and research places have the ability to access this medicine with no restrictions. Why isn't this the first line medicine? These are the things we need to have available for not just veterans, but everybody, from traumatic brain injury to diabetes to gut health. We all suffer from things. Most people who I know, veterans or not, have PTSD. These are ways to truly heal from it. The CBC, the psilocybin, these are just way easier ways to heal. And they're ways that have been used for thousands and thousands of years by our ancestors and indigenous cultures. And for as smart as we are today, we really lack in some very basic understanding on how beneficial this medicine is, because we feel the need to put it all into a laboratory to identify it. Well, let's do it then. Let's let Dr. Nep have his ability to take all this stuff apart and study it and see how it does best. Because I'll tell you, I've experienced some of the tinctures he's made, and they are definitely super beneficial. And I appreciate all your time tonight. Do you have any closing statements tonight?
I really appreciate you guys. I love talking about this and be able to educate people. And I think that is the key, is that we need more cannabis education and more awareness, and beyond the bro science. Like let's really dig into what science knows and what we're seeing anecdotally. Really proud of the tincture line that we put together. I think to augment what people can get at dispensaries, but also to give them access to those cannabinoids that are hard to find. But thankfully, with you guys, we can make it very affordable for veterans, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that how many people we've been able to help so far, and the more that people decide to use it, the more free tinctures we can give out too. Which that just that just makes my heart happy to know that we can through any proceeds we can actually help more people. But I love what you guys are doing. I support you fully, and just thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Gerald. And thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You got anything before we step out, Bryce?
No, that was it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.
All right. We'll see you all next week. Same time, same place. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, everybody.